Imagine a world where immortal dragons ruled from atop trees larger than mountains, where nothing ever changed, where time itself didn't exist. Then imagine a single flame appearing in the darkness, and from that flame, 4 beings emerged who would wage war against eternity itself. One became death, one became life, one became the Lord of Sunlight, and one split their soul into fragments and gave birth to humanity. But here's the tragedy. After building the most glorious age the world had ever seen, the god of sunlight became so terrified of losing it that he walked into the dying flame and burned himself alive, creating a curse that would trap thousands of souls in an endless cycle. All believing they were heroes, never realizing they were just fuel. Tonight, we're unraveling the complete story of Dark Souls, and I promise this isn't the tale you think it is. Before we descend into Lordran, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop a comment and tell me what corner of the world you're drifting off in. Now get comfortable, pull your blankets close. We're going back to the very beginning, to the Age of Ancients, to a gray world where everlasting dragons perched on ancient trees, waiting for something that would never come until a spark appeared in the deepest darkness and everything changed forever. Let's begin. What makes Dark Souls special is how it approaches its themes. It doesn't tell you whether the fire should continue burning or if the dark should be allowed to return. It presents both sides of the conflict and lets you decide. It shows you gods who cling desperately to their fading age and humans who might usher in something new. It depicts heroes who failed, legends that turned out to be lies, and victories that came at terrible costs. Nothing in this world is simple, and that ambiguity gives the story its depth. As we move through this tale, you'll notice certain themes recurring: the corrupting nature of power, the weight of duty, the cost of immortality, the fear of change and the unknown, the relationship between light and dark, neither purely good nor purely evil, but both necessary parts of existence. These themes wind through every part of the story, connecting disparate events into a cohesive whole. So settle in, let your breathing slow, feel the weight of your body against whatever surface supports you. We're about to journey back to the very beginning, to a time before time, to a world that existed in perfect, unchanging stasis, a world of gray stone and ancient trees and everlasting dragons, a world that knew neither life nor death, neither heat nor cold, neither light nor dark, a world waiting for the spark that would set everything in motion. In the beginning, there was nothing but gray. Not the gray of storm clouds or ash, but the gray of pure, undifferentiated existence. A world unformed, shrouded by fog so thick that nothing could be seen beyond a few feet in any direction. In this eternal twilight, there was no day or night, no seasons, no passage of time as we understand it. The world simply was. It was a vast, silent landscape where nothing grew and nothing died, because the very concepts of growth and decay hadn't been invented yet. Try to imagine a silence so profound that it wasn't just the absence of noise, but the absence of the possibility of noise. The atmosphere was thick, heavy, with a fog that didn't drift or swirl, because there was no wind to move it. This was the Age of Ancients, a period of perfect, terrifying stillness. The landscape of this era consisted of graystone crags rising from a gray earth. These crags were massive, jagged, and angular, as if the entire world had been carved from a single gargantuan boulder that spanned the cosmos. These stones did not erode. Erosion is a process of time, the slow wearing away of matter by wind and water, but in this age, time was standing still. There was no water to flow, no wind to blow, and no sun to heat the stone and cause it to crack. The mountains simply stood, eternal and unmoving monuments to a world that knew no change. They were as permanent as the fog itself, part of a foundation that seemed like it had existed forever and would continue to exist for all eternity. Among these crags grew the arch trees. These were not trees in any sense that we would recognize today. They did not have bark that aged, or leaves that changed color and fell with the seasons. They did not sprout from seeds, and they did not grow toward a sun that didn't exist. Instead, they were more like living stone themselves, ancient pillars of reality that supported the very crust of the world. Their trunks were wider than the largest castles, so massive that 1,000 men could walk abreast across their diameter and still not reach the edges. Their branches reached up into the impenetrable fog, disappearing into heights that no eye could measure. and their roots reached down into depths unknown, anchoring the world in the void. These arc trees were hollow, and within their vast trunks were entire ecosystems of stone and mist, chambers and passages that had always been there, as much a part of the universe as the air itself. And ruling over this gray world were the everlasting dragons. These were not the lesser dragons that would come later, the wyverns and drakes that could be wounded by arrows or slain by mortal hands. The everlasting dragons were beings of pure permanence. They were creatures that embodied the very concept of eternity. Their bodies were covered in stone scales, a natural armor that made them completely immortal. They were immune to any harm, unchanging as the world they inhabited. They did not age, they did not get sick, and they did not fear. The dragons did not hunt, for there was nothing to hunt. There were no animals to eat, no plants to gather. They did not fight among themselves, for there was nothing to fight over. No territory, no mates, no gold. They simply existed. Some perched atop the highest branches of the arc trees, their wings folded, staring out into the fog with eyes that saw everything and nothing. Others soared through the gray mist, their movements slow and rhythmic, eternal witnesses to a world where nothing ever happened. They had no need for food or sleep. They had no concept of ambition or desire. They were the perfect expressions of the age of ancients itself, unchanging, eternal, and utterly devoid of distinction. In this world, there was no life as we understand it. Life requires change. It requires a beginning and an end. It requires growth, the intake of energy, and the inevitable return to the earth. But in the age of ancients, nothing changed. There was no death because there was no life. The dragons existed, but they did not live in the way we do. They simply were. They had always been there, and they would always be there. It was a world of pure stasis, of perfect equilibrium, where every moment was identical to every other moment, stretching infinitely in all directions. It was a world without hope, because hope requires the possibility of a better tomorrow, and in the age of ancients, there was no tomorrow. There was only the eternal now. But beneath the surface of this unchanging world, deep underground, where even the longest roots of the arc trees did not reach, something stirring. In the deepest, darkest depths, far below the feet of the dragons and the stone mountains, a spark appeared. It was tiny at first, a mere pinprick of light against the surrounding darkness, but it grew. It was fed by nothing, emerging from nowhere, defying the very nature of the unchanging world above. This was the first flame, and its appearance changed everything. It was the moment that the universe woke up. The flame brought with it a concept that had never existed before: disparity. This is a big word, but it means something very simple. It means difference. Before the flame, everything was the same. Everything was gray, everything was stone, everything was eternal. But the flame introduced opposites. Heat and cold became distinct from one another, where before there had been only a uniform, lukewarm temperature. Life and death emerged as opposites, creating the possibility for things to begin and for things to end. And most importantly, light and dark separated. For the first time, there was a place where the light hit, and a place where the shadows fell. The first flame was not just fire as we understand it. It wasn't just wood burning in a hearth. It was the fundamental force of change itself. It was the engine that set the world in motion. Before the flame, the world was like a painting, beautiful perhaps, but static and unmoving. After the flame, the world became a play, a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. This was the birth of duality, of opposition. It was the dynamic that would drive all change, all growth, and all decay. Without the flame, nothing could ever happen. With the flame, everything became possible. The appearance of the first flame acted like a beacon, attracting beings from the dark. These were not the dragons. The dragons remained above, perched on their stone trees, either unaware or simply uncaring about the fundamental shift happening in the depths. These new beings were something else entirely. They were creatures that had perhaps existed in the gray world, but they had been indistinguishable from it. They were formless things, shadows moving through a world of shadows, waiting for the concept of form to exist. When the flame appeared, they gained identity. They became individuals, separated from the uniform grayness of the world. 4 of these beings approached the flame, and within its heat and light, they found the souls of lords. These were not ordinary souls. They were not the small sparks of life that inhabit a bird or a deer. They were powerful essences of fundamental concepts. They were distillations of the flame's own power, given distinct forms. Each being who claimed a Lord's soul was transformed by it. They were elevated from formless things of the dark into beings of immense power and distinct purpose. They became the gods of the new world. The first was Nito, who would become known as the Grave Lord. He found the soul of death. In that moment, Nito became the first dead thing. This seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? How can you be the first to die and yet still exist to lead an army? But Nito embodied death itself. He became its avatar, its administrator. He didn't just die, he became the concept of the end. His body transformed into a horrific mass of skeletons and bones. Thousands of dead things fused together into a single towering entity. He was death personified, the inevitable end of all living things. Yet he possessed a terrible, cold unlife that allowed him to move and act. He was the quiet at the end of the song, the darkness at the end of the day. The second was a woman who would become known as the Witch of Izalith. She found the soul of life. This was the generative force, the power of creation, warmth, and birth. While Nito represented the end, the witch represented the beginning. Her soul gave her mastery over fire in its creative aspect. Fire that provides warmth, fire that allows life to flourish, and fire that can be used to shape and mold the world. She had daughters, 7 in total, who shared in her power. Together, they represented the creative force of the universe, the power to bring forth new things where nothing had existed before. They were the masters of the flame, and their power was as vast as the sun itself. The third was Gwyn, and he found the most powerful of the Lord's souls, the soul of light. His soul blazed with an intensity that matched the sun. It was brilliant, terrible, and majestic. When he claimed this soul, he became Lord Gwyn, the Great Lord. He was tall, mighty, and wreathed in a golden radiance that could blind anyone who looked directly at him. He wielded the power of sunlight as a weapon, his very presence bringing order and light to the chaos of the dark. His soul was so powerful that it could be divided and shared without losing its essential strength, making him the undisputed leader of the lords. He was the architect of the future, the king of the new age. And then there was the fourth being, the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten. This small, unassuming figure found the dark soul, hidden in the deepest shadows cast by the first flame. Unlike the others, the pygmy did not use the power of this soul for personal glory or to build a kingdom. He did not grow into a giant or clothe himself in sunlight. Instead, the dark soul was split into countless fragments. Each fragment became a spark of humanity. These fragments were distributed among the beings who had come from the dark, the small, and the weak. This act gave birth to the human race. While Gwyn and the others were like great bonfires, the humans were like tiny, flickering candles. Each one was weak, but together they were a sea of light that could never be fully extinguished. With their lord's souls, these four beings looked up toward the world above, toward the gray wasteland ruled by the everlasting dragons, and they saw something that had never existed before. Possibility. They realized that the world didn't have to be gray. It didn't have to be static. It could be bright, it could be warm, and it could be theirs. The dragons represented the old world, the unchanging age of stone. But these new lords, empowered by the first flame, represented change itself. They represented the future. And they decided that the age of ancients must end so that a new age, the age of fire, could begin. Now, it's important to understand that the dragons were not tyrants. They hadn't conquered the world through cruel oppression. They simply existed as they had always existed. They were part of the landscape, as natural as the mountains or the trees. But that's precisely why they had to fall. The new age that the lords envisioned required the world to move. It required birth, death, and time. And the dragons, being eternal and unchanging, were the very opposite of change. As long as the dragons ruled, the world would remain a gray, timeless void. For the age of fire to begin, the age of ancients had to be destroyed. There was no room for both. The lords were not just fighting for territory, they were fighting for the right for time itself to exist. And so began the preparations for war. This was not a small skirmish or a brief conflict. This was the greatest war the world would ever know. It was a battle between the foundations of the universe. The lords and their followers began to gather their strength. Gwyn built an army of knights, shining in silver armor, their weapons blessed by the light of his soul. The Witch of Izalith and her daughters wove great storms of fire, learning to command the very element that had given them life. Nito prepared his plagues and his miasma, readying the cold touch of death for beings that had never known it. But even with all this power, it seemed like an impossible task. How do you defeat immortality itself? The dragons were covered in stone scales that could not be pierced. They could fly higher than any mountain. They were ancient when the lords were still formless shadows. How do you bring change to that which cannot change? How do you kill that which has no concept of death? The lords had the power of the flame, yes, but they were fighting against the very fabric of reality. But the lords had one advantage that the dragons could never have anticipated. They had an ally from within the enemy's own ranks. One of the everlasting dragons was different from all the others. His name was Seath, and he had been born with a terrible defect. He had no scales. While his brothers and sisters were clad in immortal stone, Seath's skin was pale, smooth, and vulnerable. He was mortal where they were eternal. He was imperfect where they were perfect. And this difference, this single flaw in the perfect uniformity of dragonkind, would be the crack through which the entire Age of Ancients would crumble. Seath's life had been one of jealousy and bitterness. He watched his kin soar through the skies, knowing they would live forever, while he knew he was destined to die. He was an outcast, a freak among immortals. When the lords rose from the dark, Seath saw not an enemy, but an opportunity. He saw a chance to finally gain the immortality he had been denied, and a chance to get revenge on the kin who had looked down on him. He approached Lord Gwyn and offered a betrayal that would change the course of history. He told the lords the secret of the dragon's power. He told them that the scales were the source of their immortality, and he showed them how those scales could be broken. With Seath's knowledge, the lords finally had a way to win. They understood now that the dragons were not invincible. They were just very, very well protected. If the scales could be stripped away, the dragons would become mortal. They could be hurt. They could be killed. The war was no longer an impossible struggle against eternity. It was a tactical challenge of finding a way to crack the stone. Before the first spear was thrown, let's take a closer look at the 4 beings who were about to change the world. These were not just powerful individuals, they were the embodiments of the forces that make up our existence. To understand the war, we have to understand the souls they carried. Gravelord Nito, the first of the dead, was a being of quiet, terrifying power. He didn't seek to rule a kingdom of the living. He didn't care for the sunlight of Gwyn or the creative flames of the witch. Nito's realm was the earth itself, the deep places where things go when they are finished. His lord's soul, the soul of death, allowed him to see the end of all things. When he joined the war, he brought with him a power that the dragons had never encountered, the miasma of death and disease. Imagine being a creature that has lived for millions of years without ever feeling a moment of pain or sickness, and suddenly, the very air you breathe begins to rot your lungs. That was the power Nito brought to the battlefield. He was the one who taught the universe that everything must eventually stop. The Witch of Izalith was his perfect opposite. She was a being of pure, unbridled energy. She didn't just use fire. She was fire. Her Lord's soul, the soul of life, gave her the ability to create. She could breathe life into the inanimate, could turn the cold stone of the world into something warm and pulsing. Her 7 daughters were her pride and joy, each one a master of the flame in her own right. They were the first pyromancers, weavers of a magic that was as wild and unpredictable as a forest fire. In the war, they would be the ones to burn the world's arc trees, destroying the very homes of the dragons and leaving them with nowhere to hide. Lord Gwyn was the strategist, the king, the one who brought order to the chaos. His soul of light gave him the power of the sun, and with it he created the first miracles. He didn't just fight with physical weapons, he fought with the power of the heavens. He could forge bolts of lightning in his bare hands, spears of pure energy that could strike with the force of a falling star. Gwyn was the one who organized the armies, who built the hierarchy of the new world. He was the one who promised his followers a world of beauty and light, a world where they would be the masters of their own destiny. He was a visionary, but a visionary with a very specific idea of how the world should look, and that idea revolved entirely around him. And finally, the furtive pygmy. He is the most mysterious of the four because he chose to remain hidden. While Gwyn was building his towers and the witch was weaving her spells, the pygmy was quietly spreading his soul. By splitting the dark soul into fragments, he ensured that his power would live on through humanity. He didn't want a throne. He wanted a legacy. He understood something the other lords didn't, that a single massive soul is a target, but a soul split into billions of pieces is a tide. You can kill a god, but you cannot kill an entire race. The pygmy was playing a very long game, a game that wouldn't reach its conclusion for thousands of years. He was the shadow that would always be there, waiting for the fire to go out. The war began with a roar that shook the heavens. Gwyn led the charge, his silver knights following him in a wave of shining metal and brilliant light. Above them, the dragons circled, their massive shadows blotting out what little light the first flame provided. The dragons fought with tooth and claw, their breath a force of nature that could level mountains. But the lords were ready. Gwyn's great lightning bolts were the key. He stood on the gray crags, his arm pulled back, a spear of sunfire crackling in his hand. When he threw it, the bolt didn't just hit the dragon, it exploded against its stone scales with the force of 1,000 hammers. This was the secret Seath had revealed. Lightning was the one thing that could crack the stone scales. When the bolt struck, the scales shattered, peeling away in jagged shards of rock, exposing the soft, vulnerable flesh beneath. For the first time in history, the dragons felt pain. They screamed, a sound like grinding stones and tearing metal, a sound that had never been heard in the Age of Ancients. As the scales were stripped away, the Witch of Azalith and her daughters moved in. They wove great firestorms, pillars of flame that reached up from the earth to engulf the dragons in the sky. The fire didn't just burn the dragons, it burned the arch trees they perched on. The great stone trees, which had stood for eternity, were turned into torches. The sky was no longer gray. It was a hellish orange, filled with the smoke of a dying era. The dragons, stripped of their immortality and their homes, began to fall. They crashed to the earth, their massive bodies breaking the very mountains they had once ruled. And then there was Nito. As the dragons lay wounded and dying on the ground, Nito unleashed his miasma. A thick purple fog of death and disease crawled over the battlefield. It seeped into the wounds of the dragons, rotting their flesh before they could even draw their last breath. It was a cold, clinical end to an eternal existence. Nito ensured that once a dragon fell, it would never rise again. He brought the finality of death to a race that had never known it. Seath the Scaleless watched the slaughter from a distance. He watched his kin die, watched the world he had known crumble into ash and fire. He felt no remorse. He had made his deal. For his betrayal, Gwyn had promised him a place in the new world, a title, and a chance to pursue the secret of immortality through his own research. Seath had traded the lives of his brothers for a library and a crown. He was the first scholar of the New Age, but he was also its greatest traitor. The war lasted for a long time. It wasn't a matter of days or weeks, but a grinding conflict that spanned the entire transition of the world. But eventually, the numbers began to dwindle. The dragons, who could not reproduce and could not change, were being hunted to extinction. One by one, the great lords of the air were brought down. The sky cleared of their wings, and the ground became a graveyard of stone scales and ancient bones. The Age of Ancients was over. The lords had won, but victory came at a cost. The world was no longer the perfect, stable place it had been. It was now a world of change, and change is a double-edged sword. With life comes death. With light comes dark. The lords had created a beautiful, vibrant world, but they had also created a world that could end. They had traded eternity for a moment of glory. With the dragons defeated, the lords set about building their new kingdom. Gwyn chose the highest point in the world, the peaks of the mountains that reached closest to the sun, to build his capital. He called it Anor Londo, the city of the gods of impossible beauty. The buildings were made of white marble that glowed in the light of the sun. The streets were paved with gold, and the cathedrals reached so high they seemed to touch the heavens. It was a city built for giants, a testament to the power and majesty of the lords who had conquered the world. Gwyn ruled from Orlando with a firm but fair hand. He established the laws of the New Age, created a hierarchy of gods and men, and ensured that the light of the sun reached every corner of the world. He was the great lord, the father of the Age of Fire. He had a family, sons and daughters, who would carry on his legacy. His daughter Guinevere was the embodiment of grace and fertility, her beauty a beacon of hope for all who looked upon her. His son Gwyndolin, though born with a strange affinity for the moon rather than the sun, served as the secret protector of the city. The Witch of Izalith returned to the depths, but not to the darkness. She built her own kingdom, Lost Izalith, a place of heat and fire, where she and her daughters continued to study the mysteries of the flame. They were the architects of life, the ones who ensured that the world remained warm and vibrant. They created new forms of life, experimenting with the power of the soul to see what else was possible in this new dynamic world. Nito returned to his catacombs. He was content to remain in the dark, overseeing the dead. He didn't need the sun or the gold of Orlando. He had his skulls and his silence. He was the silent partner in the new world, the one who ensured that the cycle of life and death continued to turn. As long as Nito was there, the world remained in balance. And the humans, the descendants of the furtive pygmy, they spread across the world, building their own kingdoms in the shadows of the gods. They were the laborers, the warriors, the scholars. They were the ones who lived and died in the blink of an eye compared to the gods. But they were numerous, and they were adaptable. They carried the fragments of the dark soul within them, a quiet power that they didn't yet fully understand. They worshipped the gods of Orlando, built temples to Gwyn, the witch, and lived their short lives in the warmth of the Age of Fire. For a long time, everything was perfect. This was the Golden Age. The first flame burned bright, providing endless energy and light. The gods were at the height of their power, and the world was a place of wonder. There were legends of heroes, of great deeds, and of a peace that seemed like it would last forever. But the lords had forgotten one thing. Fire, by its very nature, needs fuel. And no matter how large the fire, it will eventually burn out if the fuel is not replaced. The first flame was the source of everything, but it was not infinite. It had been sparked by the transition of the world, and as the world settled into its new form, the energy that sustained the flame began to wane. The disparity that had been so sharp began to blur. The light wasn't as bright as it used to be. The shadows weren't as deep. The heat began to fade, and a cold, gray fog, reminiscent of the Age of Ancients, began to creep back into the world. The gods were the first to notice. They could feel their power diminishing. Gwyn's lightning wasn't as sharp. Guinevere's radiance seemed to flicker. The Witch of Izalith, who understood the nature of fire better than anyone, became obsessed with finding a way to keep the flame burning. She knew that if the first flame went out, the Age of Fire would end, and the Age of Dark would begin. To the gods, the Age of Dark was the ultimate nightmare. It was a return to the unknown, a world where they would no longer be the masters. The Witch of Izalith decided to take matters into her own hands. She believed that if she could use her mastery of life and fire, she could create a new first flame. She could recreate the spark that had started it all, ensuring that the world would stay warm and bright forever. It was a goal born of love for her kingdom and fear of the dark. But it was also an act of incredible hubris. She thought she could control the fundamental forces of the universe, that she could play God with the very essence of life. Deep within the heart of Lost Izalith, the witch and her daughters began their ritual. They poured all their power, all their knowledge, and the very essence of the witch's lord's soul into the attempt. They tried to manufacture a miracle. But the first flame was not something that could be built by hand. It was a cosmic event, a moment of universal transition. By trying to force it, the witch didn't create a new first flame. She created a monster. The ritual went catastrophically wrong. Instead of a warm, controlled fire, she birthed the flame of chaos. This was a wild, hungry, distorted version of fire. It didn't provide light or life, it consumed it. The flame of chaos exploded outward, engulfing the witch and her daughters. It twisted their bodies, melting their flesh and fusing them with the distorted energy of the soul. The Witch of Izalith, the mother of pyromancy, was transformed into the Bed of Chaos, a horrific crawling mass of roots and flame, a mindless source of demonic life. Her daughters suffered similar fates. Two of them, Quillag and her sister, were fused with the bodies of giant spiders, becoming half-human monstrosities. Others were turned into demons, or simply consumed by the fire they had tried to master. The city of Lost Izalith became a hellscape of lava and stone, populated by the demons born from the Chaos Flame. These were not the natural creatures of the world. They were the mistakes of a goddess who had tried to play with fire. The disaster at Izalith was the first real crack in the perfection of the Age of Fire. It showed that the gods were not infallible, and that their attempts to preserve the world could be just as destructive as the dark they feared. The demons began to spill out of the depths, attacking the kingdoms of men and gods. Gwyn was forced to lead his knights into the depths to contain the threat. They fought a brutal, bloody war against the demons, eventually pushing them back and sealing them within the ruins of the city, but the cost was high. Many of Gwyn's finest warriors were lost, and the sense of security that had defined the Golden Age was gone. And still, the First Flame continued to fade. The disaster at Izalith had done nothing to stop the coming dark. If anything, it had accelerated it. The world was growing colder, the days were getting shorter, and a new problem was beginning to emerge among the humans, a problem that would eventually bring even the mighty Lord Gwyn to his knees. It started slowly, in the remote corners of the world. Humans who should have died from their wounds or from old age didn't. They would fall, their hearts would stop, but then they would stand back up. At first, it was seen as a miracle, a gift from the gods, but the gift soon revealed itself to be a curse. These humans were the undead. They couldn't die, but they also couldn't truly live. Every time they died and returned, they lost a piece of themselves. Their memories would fade, their skin would turn gray and shriveled like parchment, their minds would slowly unravel. Eventually, an undead would lose everything that made them human. They would become hollow, mindless, violent husks that attacked anything with a soul driven by a primal hunger for the light they had lost. The undead curse began to spread like a plague, tearing apart the kingdoms of men. Families were forced to drive out their loved ones. Cities built great asylums to lock away the cursed, hoping to keep the madness contained. But you can't contain a curse that is built into the very soul of a race. Gwyn watched as the world he had built began to fall apart. His allies were gone or transformed. His knights were tired from fighting demons. His people were turning into monsters. And the fire, his precious first flame, was now nothing more than a pile of dying embers. He knew that the time had come. The choice he had been avoiding could be delayed no longer. The Age of Dark was coming. The Age of Humanity. The Age of the Shadow. Gwyn looked at his beautiful city of Anor Londo, at the sun he had created, and at the people who worshipped him. He couldn't let it go. He was the Lord of Light, and he would not go gently into that good night. He decided on one final desperate act. If the fire needed fuel to burn, then he would give it the greatest fuel in existence. He would give it himself. Gwyn left Anor Londo, leaving his crown and his power behind. He journeyed to the kiln of the First Flame, the place where it had all begun. He stood before the dying embers, the tiny spark that had once changed the world. And then the great Lord Gwyn, the conqueror of dragons and the king of the gods, walked into the fire. He didn't just step into it, he offered his entire being to it. His Lord's soul, the most powerful light in the world, was used as kindling. The fire roared back to life, fed by the essence of a god. The light returned to the world. The sun shone bright once more. The Age of Fire was extended. But at what a price? Gwyn was not dead, but he was no longer himself. The fire consumed his mind, his memories, and his beauty. He became the first Lord of Cinder, a charred, hollow husk of a god trapped in the kiln, forever burning to keep the world bright. He had saved his age, but he had lost his soul. And in doing so, he had created the cycle. A cycle where the world is constantly brought to the brink of darkness, only to be saved by the sacrifice of a powerful soul. A cycle that would trap everyone, gods and humans alike, in an endless loop of suffering. Tonight we have walked through the fog of the past. We have seen the world of stone, the birth of fire, and the fall of the dragons. We have witnessed the rise of the gods and the tragic mistakes that led to the crumbling of their world. But this is only the beginning. The sacrifice of Gwyn bought time, but it didn't solve the problem. The fire is still fading, the curse is still spreading, and somewhere in an asylum far to the north, a lone undead is about to wake up. The story of Lordran is a story of shadows and echoes. It is a story of what happens when we are too afraid to let go of the past. It is a story of the beauty that can be found in a dying world. As we prepare to move into the next chapter of our journey, remember the gray world of the dragons. Remember the heat of the first flame. And remember the face of Gwyn as he walked into the fire. Because everything that follows, every hero you meet, every boss you fight, and every soul you collect is a direct result of that one fateful choice. Close your eyes now and imagine the embers of a dying fire. See the way they glow in the dark, fighting against the inevitable cold. That is the world of Dark Souls, a world of light that is always just a moment away from going out. A world where you, the player, are the only thing standing between the flame and the dark. But before we get to your story, we have many more legends to uncover. We have to speak of the knights who stayed behind, of the traitors in the shadows, and of the hidden truths that Gwyn tried to burn away. The history of the world is written in blood and ash. The gods thought they could control the fire, but in the end, the fire controlled them. They thought they were the masters of destiny, but they were just players in a cycle they couldn't break. As the darkness closes in, we will find that the truth is often buried deeper than the roots of the arc trees. The world did not simply end when Gwyn walked into the fire. It stalled. It gasped. It bought itself a few more centuries of borrowed time. But time, once set in motion by the first flame, is a cruel master. It demands to be paid in full, and the interest on a god's life is steep. When Gwyn offered his soul to the embers, he didn't just save the world, he shackled it. He turned the natural expiration of an era into a long, agonizing decline. This is the period we often call the Twilight of the Gods, a time when the golden brilliance of Anor Londo began to rust, and the shadows that Gwyn so feared started to grow long and hungry. Imagine standing on the walls of that great city just after Gwyn's departure. The sun still shines, yes, but its light feels different. It lacks the heat it once had. It's a pale, sickly gold that doesn't quite reach the corners of the rooms. The halls, once filled with the laughter of deities and the clatter of silver-clad knights, are falling silent. One by one, the gods are leaving. Guinevere, the princess of sunlight, has fled, seeking a new life with the flame god Flan. The lesser deities, the servants, the artists, they see the writing on the wall. They know that a king who has to burn himself alive to stay relevant is a king of a dying land. They depart for distant shores, leaving behind a city that is becoming a mausoleum of memories. But while the gods were fleeing, the humans were being trapped. The undead curse, which had been a flickering campfire in the distance, was now a raging forest fire. It was no longer a rare affliction. It was becoming the human condition. Think about the sheer psychological horror of the dark sign. You wake up one morning and see that ring of fire on your skin. You know, in that moment, that your life as a mortal is over. You will never grow old. You will never rest in the earth with your ancestors. You are now a being of the transition, a creature of the threshold. You are destined to die and rise, until the very concept of you is worn away by the friction of existence. The kingdoms of men, Astora, Baldur, Berenaik, Katarina, they didn't go down without a fight. They were proud civilizations with their own traditions and their own strength. But how do you maintain a kingdom when your farmers are turning into mindless husks? How do you command an army when your soldiers keep rising from the dead with no memory of their duty? The social fabric of the world didn't just tear, it disintegrated. The fear of the hollow became the primary emotion of the age. This fear led to the creation of the undead asylums. These were not hospitals, they were dumping grounds. They were places where society could throw its broken people and forget about them, tucked away in the frozen wastes of the north, where the wind howls through the bars of cells that were never meant to be opened. This is where our story truly finds its heartbeat. In one of these cells in the Northern Undead Asylum, a lone figure sits in the dark. This is the character we call the Chosen Undead. But at this moment, they are nothing. They are just another shriveled body in a pile of shriveled bodies, waiting for the end of a world that refuses to end. The air here is cold, smelling of old stone and stagnant water. There is no sound but the occasional groan of a fellow prisoner or the heavy, wet footsteps of the asylum demon, a bloated, winged monstrosity that patrols the grounds, ensuring that no one ever leaves. Then something impossible happens. A body is dropped from a hole in the ceiling, and with it, a key. This is the work of Oscar, a knight of Astora. Oscar is a man who still believes in stories. He still believes in the old prophecy that says an undead will be chosen to leave the asylum, travel to the land of the ancient lords, and ring the bells of awakening. Oscar is wounded, dying his final death, but he passes the torch to you. He represents the last gasp of chivalry in a world that has largely forgotten what that word means. He gives you hope, and in the world of Lordran, hope is the most dangerous thing you can carry. Escaping the asylum is your first taste of the reality of the age. You have to fight your way through creatures that were once men, now reduced to pathetic shadows that swing broken swords with mindless repetition. You have to face the asylum demon, a creature of pure, chaotic energy, and prove that you have the will to survive. When you finally stand on the cliffside outside the prison, the wind whipping against your gray skin, a giant crow descends. This bird is a messenger, a transport, a link between the prison and the pilgrimage. It carries you away from the frozen north and drops you at Firelink Shrine. Firelink is the heart of the ruins. It's a place where the grass still grows, where a bonfire burns with a steady, comforting glow, and where the music is a mournful, repetitive melody that speaks of ancient sorrows. This is the center of Lordran, the place where all paths meet. But the greeting you receive is far from heroic. You meet the crestfallen warrior, a man who arrived here long before you. He is the personification of the world's exhaustion. He tells you the truth. You aren't special. Hundreds have come before you, and hundreds have failed. He tells you about the bells, but he does so with a sneer, as if the very idea of a chosen undead is a joke that has been told too many times. But you have no choice but to move forward. The only other option is to sit by the fire and wait to turn into a mindless husk. And so the journey begins. You climb the cliffs toward the Undead Burg, the lower city that once housed the servants and soldiers of the gods. Now it is a labyrinth of crumbling stone and barricaded doors. The Burg is a masterpiece of vertical design. You aren't just moving through a city, you are climbing through a history of decline. You see the barracks, the merchant stalls, the watchtowers, all of them occupied by the Hollows. They aren't evil, they are just empty. They are guarding a city that died 1,000 years ago because their brains can't process any other command. As you fight your way through the Burg, you meet Solaire of Astora. In a world of gray and brown, Solaire is a sunbeam. He wears armor decorated with a hand-painted sun, and he speaks with a bizarre, infectious enthusiasm. Solaire is searching for his own sun, a literal or metaphorical light to guide him through the darkness. He introduces the concept of cooperation. The flow of time itself is convoluted, he says, explaining why you see the phantoms of other warriors. He offers you a way to summon help, to bridge the gaps between worlds. Solaire is a reminder that even in a world defined by the loss of the self, we can still find meaning in helping one another. He represents the sunlight in a literal sense, warmth, companionship, and a refusal to let the dark win. The path to the first bell takes you through the Undead Parish, where a great cathedral stands as a monument to the Way of White, the religion of Gwyn. Here, the struggle is more intense. You face the Channelers, sorcerers in many-eyed robes who serve Seath the Scaleless, the traitor dragon. You face the Tower Knight, a massive wall of steel. And finally, you reach the roof, where the bell gargoyles await. These are stone constructs I brought to life to guard the sacred bell. They are the first true test of your worth. When you finally defeat them and climb the ladder to ring that first bell, the sound echoes across the valley. It's a deep, resonant tone that seems to wake the very earth itself. You've done it. You've taken the first step of the prophecy. But the second bell is not in a cathedral. It is in the rot. To reach the second bell, you must descend. You go through the lower burg, a cramped and filthy slum where the Capra demon hides in the shadows with its hounds. You go through the depths, the sewers of the world, where the gaping dragon, a creature so hungry for life that its entire chest has opened into a massive, tooth-filled maw, wanders the slime. This is the underbelly of the Age of Fire. This is where all the waste, all the unwanted things, and all the forgotten tragedies have settled. The air is thick with the smell of sewage and decay, and then you reach Blighttown. If Anor Londo is the dream of the gods, Blighttown is their nightmare. It is a city built on stilts and rickety wooden platforms suspended over a vast, poisonous swamp. It is a place of filth, of leeches, of fire-breathing bugs, and of a sickness that seeps into the bones. The people here were once humans who were cast out of the city above. They have mutated, their bodies warped by the poison, and the chaotic energies leaking from the depths below. Navigating Blighttown is a lesson in misery. You are constantly one misstep away from a fatal fall, constantly struggling against the toxic environment. It is the absolute low point of the journey, a place that tests your resolve more than any boss ever could. At the bottom of the swamp, you find the entrance to the demon ruins, and there you face Quelag, the daughter of Chaos. Remember the Witch of Izalith and her daughters? Quelag is one of them. She is a beautiful woman from the waist up, but her lower half is a massive fire-spitting spider. She isn't fighting you because she's a monster. She's fighting you to protect her sister, the Fair Lady, who is dying in a hidden chamber nearby. Her sister took the blight of the people into herself to save them, and now she needs humanity, the fragments of the dark soul, to stay alive. Quelag is hunting undead to feed her sister's fading life. It's a tragic, beautiful motivation that turns a simple boss fight into a moral dilemma. You kill her because you have to, but as you ring the second bell in the ruins of her home, the victory feels hollow. With both bells rung, the world changes. A great gate in the mountains, which has been sealed for eons, slowly grinds open. This is the entrance to Sen's fortress. If the Burg was a city and Blighttown was a swamp, Sen's fortress is a machine. It is a house of traps designed specifically to kill anyone who tries to reach the city of the gods. Swinging blades, pressure plates that fire bolts, rolling boulders, and serpent men who strike from the shadows. The fortress is a proving ground. It was built by the gods to ensure that only the strongest, most determined undead could ever set foot in Anor Londo. It is a cold, mechanical filter designed to separate the chosen from the fuel. You climb the fortress, dodging lightning and stone, and eventually face the iron golem atop the highest tower. It is a mindless titan of brass and iron, a final guardian of the threshold. When it falls, you are at the highest point you've ever been. The air is thin and cold, and then the demons appear, winged, thin creatures that don't attack, but carry you. They lift you over the massive walls that surround the peak, and for the first time, you see it. Anor Londo. The sight is breathtaking. After the filth of Blighttown and the gray stone of the Burg, the city of the gods is a vision of gold and white. The sun is huge and bright, bathing the cathedrals in a warm, eternal glow. It looks perfect. It looks like the Age of Fire never ended. But as you step onto the marble walkways, you realize the silence is wrong. There are no people. There are only the sentinels, giant, brass-armored knights that stand motionless, guarding empty halls. The city is a ghost town, a beautiful shell. Navigating Anor Londo is a different kind of challenge. You aren't fighting through filth, you are fighting through majesty. You have to walk along the narrow rafters of a great cathedral, dodging the throwing knives of the painting guardians. You have to face the Silver Knight archers, men who fire arrows the size of spears from positions that seem impossible to reach. These archers have become a legend among those who play the game, a symbol of the sheer, uncompromising difficulty of reaching the heart of the god's power. Finally, you reach the inner sanctum, where you face the two most famous defenders of the city, Dragon Slayer Ornstein and Executioner Smough. Ornstein is the noble knight, quick as lightning, wearing golden armor shaped like a lion. Smough is the brutal giant, wielding a hammer the size of a house, his armor a grotesque, golden caricature of a human form. They represent the two sides of Gwyn's rule, the heroic and the horrific. Fighting them is the peak of the experience. It is a dance of death in a hall of heroes. When they fall, the path to the princess is finally open. You enter the chamber of Guinevere, and she is magnificent. She is a giantess of radiant beauty, reclining on a massive couch, her voice like honey. She praises you. She tells you that you are indeed the chosen undead. She gives you the Lord Vessel, a massive golden bowl that will allow you to hold the souls of the ancient lords. She tells you that your task is to succeed Lord Gwyn to link the fire and start a new age. It's everything you wanted to hear. It's the validation of all your suffering. But if you look closely, something is wrong. If you shoot an arrow at the princess, she doesn't bleed. She shatters like glass. The sun disappears. The golden light vanishes. Anor Londo is instantly plunged into a cold, dark night. The city you saw was an illusion. Guinevere isn't there. She left long ago. The sun isn't there. It's just a magical projection. The entire experience was a puppet show put on by the one god who stayed behind, Darkmoon Gwyndolin. Gwyndolin is Gwyn's youngest son. He was born with an affinity for the moon and has snakes for legs, a mutation that made him an outcast in his own family. He was raised as a daughter and hidden away in the shadows. But Gwyndolin is the most loyal of all. He uses his mastery of illusions to keep the image of Anor Londo alive, to keep the humans believing that the gods are still there, and to guide Chosen Undead toward the fire. He is the master of the prophecy. He is the one who created the story of the Chosen Undead to ensure that someone would eventually come to provide more fuel for the flame. This realization changes everything. You aren't a hero chosen by fate. You are a victim of a very long, very elaborate con job. You were manipulated into climbing out of a hole, ringing bells, and killing heroes, all so you could eventually burn yourself alive to keep a lie going for a little while longer. The sunlight you were following was just a trick of the light. This is where the two primordial serpents come in. When you return to Firelink Shrine with the Lord Vessel, you meet Kingseeker Frampt. He is a bizarre creature, a long-necked serpent with a face that looks as disturbingly like a distorted human, complete with sagging skin and giant teeth. Frampt claims to be an old friend of Lord Gwyn. He encourages you. He tells you that linking the fire is the ultimate noble act. He frames the world's survival as being entirely dependent on your willingness to sacrifice yourself. He represents the status quo. He wants the Age of Fire to continue because he is a creature of that age. He is the voice of tradition, of the way things have always been. But there is another serpent hidden in the abyss. Darkstalker Kathe. Kathe tells a very different story. He tells you about the furtive pygmy. He tells you that the Age of Fire is a false age, a distortion of the natural order. He says that the Age of Dark is the age of man, and that by linking the fire, you are betraying your own kind to serve the gods who have already abandoned you. Kathe wants you to let the fire go out, to become the Dark Lord, and to lead humanity into the shadows. He represents revolution, the total destruction of the old system to make way for something new. So, who do you believe? Frampt, who wants to preserve a beautiful but dying world through sacrifice? Or Kathe, who wants to usher in an unknown future by letting the world fall into darkness? Both of them are manipulators. Both of them are using you. Lordran is a land of two lies, and you are caught right in the middle. To make your choice, you must first fill the Lord Vessel. You need the souls of the beings who were there at the beginning. You have to hunt down the remnants of the gods. You go to the Duke's Archives, a crystal-filled library where Seath the Scaleless has gone mad. Seath, the traitor dragon, has spent centuries trying to find the secret of immortality. He has turned himself into a monstrous, blind thing, experimenting on maidens and hoarding knowledge that has long since rotted his mind. Killing him is an act of mercy for a creature that traded his soul for a pile of books. You go to the Tomb of the Giants, a place of total, crushing darkness where you can't see your hand in front of your face without a light source. Here, Nito, the Grave Lord, still waits. He is the administrator of death, but he has become a target for those who want his power. You fight your way through the skeletons of giants, descend into the deepest pits, and face the first of the dead. Nito doesn't speak. He just exists. He is the inevitable end, and by taking his soul, you are taking the power of death itself. You return to the ruins of New Lundo, the city that the gods flooded to contain the abyss. You have to drain the water, revealing the thousands of corpses that have been rotting in the dark for centuries. You descend into the abyss itself, a place of nothingness where the four kings dwell. These were human rulers who were given fragments of Gwyn's soul, but they were corrupted by the dark. They are now shadowy, ethereal monsters that attack from all sides. To fight them, you have to wear the Ring of Artorias, the knight who supposedly walked the abyss. And finally, you return to Lost Ezzelith to face the Bed of Chaos. This isn't even a fight in the traditional sense. It's a desperate scramble to destroy the glowing core of a dying goddess. The Bed of Chaos is a tragedy made manifest, a being that tried to create life and ended up creating a cancer that consumed her entire family. When you strike the final blow, you aren't just getting a soul, you are putting an end to a nightmare that has lasted for an age. With the souls of the lords in the vessel, the way to the kiln of the first flame is finally open. But before we go there, we have to talk about the man who failed. We have to talk about Knight Artorias. His story is the key to understanding why the world is in the state it's in. The legend says that Artorias was the hero who stopped the abyss in the land of Ulysses. It says he was the unbendable warrior who protected the innocent. But when you travel back in time to Ulysses, you find a very different truth. Ulysses was a kingdom of sorcery, a place where people studied the soul. But they were greedy. They were tempted by a serpent, likely Cathay, to dig up the grave of the primeval man, Manus. When they woke him, his humanity went wild. It turned into the abyss, a physical force of darkness that mutated the people of Ulasil into horrific, long-limbed monsters. The city was swallowed by the dark. Gwyn sent Artorias to stop it, but the abyss is not a monster you can stab with a sword. It is an emotion. It is a weight. It is the crushing pressure of a billion souls crying out at once. Artorias, the greatest of Gwyn's knights, was not strong enough. His left arm was shattered. His shield was used to protect his wolf companion, Sif, while he was consumed by the dark. When you meet Artorias, he is a broken shell. He is a mindless puppet of the abyss, his legendary swordsmanship turned into a chaotic, violent dance. You kill Artorias, and you are the one who actually defeats Manus, the father of the abyss. But the history books will never mention you. They will say Artorias did it. They will keep the legend alive because the world needs heroes more than it needs the truth. Artorias' failure is the ultimate proof that the Age of Fire is over. If the best of the gods' knights couldn't handle the dark, what hope does anyone else have? This brings us back to you, standing before the altar of the kiln. You have the souls. You have the power. You have the knowledge of the lies. The path ahead leads to the embers of the first fire, where the charred husk of Gwyn waits to test you one last time. This journey has been one of constant loss. You've lost your humanity, your home, and your illusions. You've seen the gods at their worst and the humans at their most desperate. You've walked through the gold of Honor Londo and the filth of Blighttown. You've met Solare, the man who wanted to be the sun, and you've seen him fall into madness. You've met Siegmeyer of Katarina, the jolly knight who just wanted an adventure, and you've seen him realize his own uselessness. The world of Lordran doesn't reward you for your efforts. It just keeps taking until there's nothing left. But there is a beauty in this struggle. There is a dignity in the way these characters continue to fight, even when they know the end is coming. There is a sense of togetherness in the way we help each other through the convoluted flow of time. We are all undead, all searching for a sun that might not even be there. As we prepare to enter the final stage of our story, think about the weight of the Lord Vessel. Think about the souls of the beings you had to kill to get here. They were the architects of the world, and now their essence is in your hands. You are the most powerful being in Lordran, but you are also the most alone. The serpents are waiting for your answer. The fire is waiting for its fuel, and the dark is waiting for its time. I want you to stay with me for the next part. We are going to talk about the final confrontation with Gwyn. We are going to talk about the meaning of the endings, what it really means to link the fire, and what it really means to walk away. We'll look at the legacy of this world, how it echoes into the future, and why, after all these years, we are still drawn to the dying embers of Lordran. But for now, just breathe. The bells have been rung. The lords have been defeated. The city of the gods has been revealed as a shadow. You've done the impossible. You've survived the descent and the climb. Let the warmth of the bonfire settle into your bones. Let the music of Firelink Shrine soothe your tired mind. You've earned a moment of rest before the end. The night is deep, and the stars are hidden behind the fog of the past. But here by the fire, we are safe. We have each other's stories to keep us warm. Don't worry about the choice yet. That will come in time. For now, just remember the journey. Remember the feeling of the wind on the bridge, the smell of the swamp, and the sight of the sun, even if it was just a lie. Because in a world that's going dark, even a beautiful lie is worth something. I'll see you in the next chapter. We will finish this together. Stay safe, stay sane, and keep your flame burning, however small it may be. The end is near, but we still have a little more ground to cover. Good night, traveler. May your sleep be deep and your dreams be of a world where the sun never sets. But even if it does, we'll be ready for the dark. Lordran is a place of infinite patience. The stones don't care if you succeed or fail. The wind doesn't care if you live or die. But you care, and that is why you are still here. That is why you are the Chosen Undead. Not because a prophecy said so, but because you refuse to stop. You are the only thing in this world that is still moving, still changing, still hoping. And that in itself is the greatest miracle of all. The fire is low, but it's not out yet. I'll be here when the first light of the final day breaks over the horizon. Until then, let the silence of the shrine be your blanket. You've come so far. Just a little further now. Just a little further into the heart of the flame. As we look back at the path we've walked, it's clear that the tragedy of Lordran isn't just that the world is ending. It's the desperate, beautiful ways everyone tried to stop it. From the witch's failed flame to Gwyn's ultimate sacrifice, from Artorias' hopeless battle against the abyss to Gwendolyn's grand illusion, these are all acts of love. Love for a world that was bright, love for a family that was together, and love for a dream that was too good to be true. Even the monsters we fought were often just victims of this same love. Quelog, trying to save her sister. Seath, trying to live. Sif, guarding the grave of his master to prevent anyone else from falling to the abyss. This is a world where everyone is trying their best and everyone is failing. It's a tragedy in the classical sense, where the very strengths of the characters are what lead to their downfall. And you, the player, are the final actor in this play. You carry the weight of all these failures. You carry the souls of the fallen. What will you do with them? Will you use them to give the world one more day of light? Or will you use them to finally let the curtain fall? There is no right answer. There is only your answer. As we stand on the threshold of the end, I want you to take a moment and think about the people you met along the way. Because while the story of Dark Souls is a story of gods and ancient dragons, it is also a story of small, broken individuals trying to find a reason to keep moving in a world that has given up on them. Before we step into the kiln, before we face the charred remains of a once mighty king, we have to talk about the friends we made in the shadow of the bells. Their stories are the true weight of Lordran. They are the ones who make the choice at the end so difficult. When you look at the embers of the first flame, you aren't just looking at the fate of the world, you're looking at the final resting place of everyone you ever cared about. Let's talk about Solaire of Astora. You remember him, don't you? That bright, shining knight standing on the balcony in the undead burg, staring at the sun as if it were his only friend. Solaire is perhaps the most beloved figure in all of Lordran, and for good reason. In a land defined by cynicism and despair, Solaire chose to be happy. He chose to believe in something. He told you that he became undead specifically so he could seek his own sun. It's a beautiful, poetic goal, but it's also deeply sad when you realize that in Lordran, the sun is a lie. The light Solaire worshipped was just a projection, a bit of stage magic maintained by a hidden god to keep the humans in line. Solaire was chasing a ghost. As you progress through the world, you keep running into him. He's always there to help you, always ready to raise his sword against the monsters that stand in your way. He calls it jolly cooperation. He believes that by helping each other, we can overcome the darkness. But as the world gets darker, Solaire's optimism begins to crack. You find him in the demon-infested ruins of Lost Izalith, and for the first time, he sounds tired. He hasn't found his son. He's searched the highest towers and the deepest pits, and he's found nothing but ash and stone. He starts to wonder if he was wrong. He starts to doubt the very core of his being. And then comes the tragedy. If you aren't careful, if you don't take a secret path to save him, Solaire finds a son in the worst possible way. He finds a sunlight maggot, a glowing parasitic insect that latches onto his head and burrows into his brain. When you find him, he's gone mad. He thinks the parasite is his son. He attacks you, screaming about how he's finally found his, while the bug on his head glows with a sickly, artificial radiance. It is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the journey. The man who wanted to be a hero, the man who wanted to bring warmth to the world, ends up as a mindless puppet of a cave-dwelling insect. You have to kill him. You have to put down the only friend you had. But if you do save him, if you kill the maggot before it finds him, Solaire makes it to the very end. He is the only one who can stand beside you when you face Gwyn. He stands there, his armor scorched and his spirit bruised, still willing to help you one last time. He represents the best of humanity, the part of us that refuses to give up on our dreams, even when we know they are impossible. Solaire is the son he was looking for, but he never realized it. Then there is Siegmeyer of Katarina, the Onion Knight. With his round, bulbous armor and his tendency to fall asleep in dangerous places, Siegmeyer seems like a bit of a joke at first. He's always getting stuck, always waiting for someone to help him open a gate or clear a path. He represents the adventurer, the man who lives for the thrill of the quest. But Siegmeyer has a secret shame. He knows he isn't a great hero. He knows he's only made it this far because of you. Every time you save him, you take away a little bit of his pride. You are helping him to death. His story ends in the hidden, silent beauty of Ash Lake, the place where the arch trees still stand and where a lone, immortal dragon still waits for an age that will never return. His daughter Sieglinde finds him there. She's been following him, trying to bring him home, but Siegmeyer has gone hollow. He couldn't handle the realization that he was useless, that he was just a burden. His daughter has to kill him. She stands over his body, weeping while the ancient trees tower over them. It's a reminder that even the most well-intentioned help can be a form of destruction. In Lordran, even your friendship has a cost. We can't forget the scholars either. Big Hat Logan, the greatest sorcerer of his age, came to Lordran to find the secrets of Seath the Scaleless. He wanted knowledge more than anything. He wanted to understand the fundamental mechanics of the soul. But knowledge in Dark Souls is a poison. The more Logan learned, the more he became like Seath. He started to lose his grip on reality. He started to see patterns that weren't there. Eventually, you find him in the crystal caves, naked and raving, having discarded his clothes and his humanity in pursuit of a truth that his human mind couldn't possibly hold. He became a mirror of the dragon he studied. Brilliant, powerful, and utterly insane. These are the people whose souls you carry as you walk toward the kiln. You aren't just a warrior, you are a graveyard. You are carrying the hopes of Solaire, the pride of Siegmeyer, and the madness of Logan. You are the sum total of every tragedy that has occurred since Oscar dropped that key into your cell. And so, we arrive at the entrance to the kiln of the First Flame. To get here, you've had to fill the Lord Vessel with the souls of the architects of the world. If you choose to link the fire, you approach the embers and reach out. You offer your soul, the most powerful soul in the history of the world, to the flame. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the fire catches. It rushes up your arm, engulfing you in a pillar of brilliant golden light. The world outside the kiln turns bright. The sun returns. The undead curse is lifted for a time. You have saved the world. You have become the next Lord of Cinder. You will sit in that arena, burning slowly for centuries, until you, too, are nothing but a charred husk, waiting for the next chosen undead to come and kill you. You have continued the cycle. You have bought the world one more day of light, but you have paid for it with your existence. If you choose to walk away, you simply turn your back on the fire. You walk out of the arena, through the fog, and back toward the world. Behind you, the first flame flickers one last time and goes out. The light vanishes. The kiln is plunged into total, absolute darkness. But in that darkness, you aren't alone. The primordial serpents emerge from the shadows, bowing their heads to you. They call you the Dark Lord. They tell you that the age of man has begun. The gods are gone. The illusions are shattered. The world will now be ruled by the shadows, and you will be their king. It is a world of freedom, but it is also a world of cold and uncertainty. The sun is gone, and it's never coming back. Which ending is good? Most people think linking the fire is the right thing to do. It feels heroic, but think about what you are actually doing. You are sacrificing yourself to maintain a system that was built on lies. You are keeping the gods in power, even though they've already abandoned the world. You are refusing to let the world grow up. You are keeping it trapped in an eternal childhood, where the sun only shines because you are burning to make it so. Walking away feels dark, but it is also the most honest choice. It is an acceptance of the natural order. It is letting the old world die so that something new can be born. It is the age of man, a time when we no longer have to look to the heavens for guidance. But it is also terrifying. We have lived in the warmth of the fire for so long that we don't know how to survive in the dark. But here's the most tragic part of Dark Souls. Your choice might not even matter, because the fire always fades, but it also always returns. Imagine thousands of years passing. The world of Lordran has turned to dust. The names of Gwyn, Solaire, and Artorias have been forgotten by everyone but the most ancient of scholars. New kingdoms have risen and fallen on the same spot. This is the world of Dark Souls 2. This is the land of Drangleic. Drangleic is a land that is haunted by the past, even if it doesn't remember it. It is ruled by King Vendrick, a man who thought he could find a way to break the cycle. Vendrick was a mighty conqueror, a man who built a vast empire and defeated the giants. But even he couldn't escape the curse. He saw his people turning into hollows. He saw the fire fading. He tried everything to find a cure. He studied the soul, he experimented with the essence of the giants, and he sought the throne of want. But Vendrick realized something that Gwyn never did. He realized that the light and the dark are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. The first sin, as his brother Aldia called it, was Gwyn's attempt to separate them, to keep the light burning forever. By doing that, Gwyn created a world that was out of balance. The more you try to force the light to stay, the more the dark pushes back. The undead curse isn't a disease, it's the world trying to reset itself. Vendrick was also manipulated, much like you were. He was led by his queen, Nashandra. She was beautiful, elegant, and wise, but Nashandra was not human. She was a shard of Manus, the father of the Abyss. When you defeated Manus in Ulasil, his soul didn't just vanish. It shattered into fragments. Each fragment became a woman, a queen who would seek out a powerful king and tempt him into darkness. Nashandra wanted Vendrick to open the way to the first flame so she could claim its power for the dark. Vendrick was smart enough to see through her plan at the last second. He didn't want to link the fire, and he didn't want her to have it. So he did the only thing he could. He ran away. He locked himself in a deep, dark crypt, surrounded himself with his most loyal knights, and threw away the key. He chose to go hollow in the dark rather than be a puppet for the dark. When you find him in Drangleic, he is a massive, mindless giant, wandering in circles in a stone room, dragging his sword behind him. He is the image of a king who chose to lose everything rather than let the cycle win. Dark Souls 2 shows us that the cycle is a prison. It doesn't matter if you link the fire or not. If you let it go out, someone else will eventually come along and spark it again. If you link it, it will eventually fade. The world is stuck in a loop of rising and falling kingdoms, each one built on the ruins of the last, each one struggling with the same curse, and each one eventually succumbing to the dark. This brings us to a new character, one who is perhaps the most important figure in the entire series, Aldia, scholar of the first sin. Aldia was Vendrick's brother, and he was the one who realized the truth. He saw that the prophecy of the Chosen Undead was just a trap. He saw that the world was a lie. He tried to step outside the cycle. He experimented on himself, turning himself into a being of pure, chaotic energy, a mass of roots and fire that exists between the light and the dark. Aldia speaks to you throughout your journey in Drangleic. He asks you the hard questions. There is no path, he tells you. Beyond the scope of light, beyond the reach of dark, what could possibly await us? He is the only one who encourages you to find a third way. He doesn't want you to be a Lord of Cinder, and he doesn't want you to be a Dark Lord. He wants you to be something else. He wants you to be the one who finally breaks the machine. But how do you break a machine that is built into the very fabric of reality? In Drangleic, you find the crowns of the ancient kings. These were rulers who, for a brief moment, managed to hold back the curse in their own lands. They built cities in the mountains, in the depths of the earth, and in the frozen wastes. By collecting these crowns and bringing them to the memory of King Vendrick, you are given a gift. For the first time, you are truly immune to hollowing. You are a being who can stand outside the curse. You have the power to see the world for what it really is. But even with this power, the cycle continues. The fire fades, the dark rises, and a new age begins. As we look at the transition between these eras, I want you to think about the nature of memory. In Dark Souls 2, the names of the gods from the first game are gone. They are referred to only as the Great Dead One, or the Old Paladrake. The world has forgotten its history, but it is still doomed to repeat it. This is the true horror of the cycle. It isn't just that people die, it's that their sacrifices are forgotten. Solaire's struggle, Artorias' fall, your own choice at the kiln, eventually it all just becomes dust. It becomes a story told by a serpent who only tells half the truth. Imagine the world as a piece of paper. The Age of Ancients was the blank page. The Age of Fire was the first time someone wrote on it. But they didn't like what they wrote, so they tried to erase it and start over. But you can never completely erase the ink. Each time the fire is linked, the paper gets a little more worn. Each time the cycle repeats, the world gets a little more distorted. The ink starts to bleed. The lines get blurry. By the time we reach the end of the series, the paper is so thin that it's starting to tear. But we haven't reached the end yet. We still have the final age to explore. We have to talk about the land of Lothric, where the world is literally being pulled together by the gravity of the fading flame. We have to talk about the Lords of Cinder who refused their thrones, and about the Unkindled, those who tried to link the fire but weren't strong enough and were cast aside like trash. The story of Dark Souls is a long, slow goodbye. It is the story of a world that is tired of existing. It's the story of the beauty that remains when everything else is gone. As you close your eyes and listen to the wind, imagine the sound of the piano from Gwyn's arena. It is still playing somewhere in the distance. It is the soundtrack of the universe. In the next part, we will finish the story. We will walk through the ruins of Lothric. We will face the soul of Cinder, the manifestation of everyone who has ever linked the fire. And we will finally see what happens when the fire goes out for good. We will see the end of the cycle and the beginning of whatever comes after. But for now, just think about Vendrick, sitting in his dark room. Think about Solaire, looking for his son. Think about the choices you've made and the people you've lost. The world is a heavy place, but you've carried it this far. You've done more than any god could. You've survived the lie. Take a deep breath. The air is cold, but the fire in your soul is still burning. You are the Chosen Undead, the bearer of the curse, the Unkindled. You are the one who decides what the darkness means. Rest now. The final journey is waiting for us, and the night is almost over. But before the dawn, there is one more story to tell. The shadows are moving and the embers are low, but we are still here. We are still together. And as long as we have our stories, the dark can't take us. Sleep well, traveler. The end is coming, but it's not here yet. We have a few more moments of light before the curtain falls. I want you to imagine the sound of a bell ringing in the distance. Not the bells of awakening, but a funeral bell. It's calling all the heroes of the past to their final resting place. It's calling you too. But don't be afraid. The dark isn't an ending. It's just a different kind of beginning. It's the peace that comes after a very long day. We have seen the gods at their highest and the humans at their lowest. We have seen the fire at its brightest and the dark at its deepest. And what we've found is that the only thing that truly matters is the soul. Not the giant glowing Lord souls, but the small, flickering fragments of humanity that we share with each other. That is the only thing that can't be burned away. That is the only thing that stays when the fire goes out. Stay with me for the final chapter. We will see the sunset one last time, and we will find out what lies the scope of light. I'll be here, waiting for you in the ashes. Good night, traveler. May your soul find its way home. The journey through Drangleic taught us that even when we are forgotten, our actions have echoes. Vendrick's refusal to be a puppet, Lucatiel's desperate plea for you to remember her name as she lost her mind to the curse, the Emerald Herald's quiet guidance. These are the things that define the era. It wasn't the battles won or the kingdoms built, but the moments of connection in a world that was actively trying to erase them. Memory is the only weapon we have against the cycle. As long as someone remembers, the tragedy isn't complete. That's why we tell these stories. That's why we remember the name of Artorias, even if the history books got it wrong. That's why we remember Solaire, even if he never found his son. We are the keepers of the flame, not the physical fire in the kiln, but the fire of memory that keeps the darkness of forgetting at bay. Close your eyes. Hear the gentle lap of the water against the shores of Ash Lake. Feel the warmth of the bonfire against your skin. The world is ending, but we are still here, and in this moment, that is enough. In the final part, we will see the culmination of all these ages. We will see the world of Dark Souls 3, where the past, present, and future collide in a final, apocalyptic struggle. We will see the end of the story of the gods and the final fate of humanity. We will see the Age of Dark that was so feared, and we will find out if it was really as bad as Gwyn thought it would be. Now, open your eyes one last time. We are no longer in the golden halls of Anor Londo, nor are we in the forgotten crypts of Drangleic. We have arrived at the final stop. We are in the land of Lothric, and the world is literally screaming. If the Age of Ancients was a silent stone, and the Age of Fire was a roaring bonfire, then the time of Lothric is the sound of a fire that has been starved for so long that it is starting to eat itself. The sky is no longer blue or even dark. It is a bruised, bleeding orange, with the sun hanging like a leaking wound, dripping liquid fire into a world that can no longer hold its own weight. Lothric is a land of convergence. Because the first flame is so weak, space and time have completely broken down. The very lands are shifting, pulling toward the castle of Lothric like iron filings to a magnet. You see the windmills of Earthen Peak sitting next to the cathedrals of Anor Londo. You see the forests of Farron growing over the graves of the past. The world is folding in on itself, trying to gather what little heat is left before the eternal winter begins. It is a messy, chaotic, and beautiful disaster. And into this disaster, you are woken not as a hero, but as an accident. You are the unkindled. Think about that word for a moment. You aren't chosen. You aren't even undead in the traditional sense. You are ash. You are one of the countless souls who in previous ages tried to link the fire but weren't strong enough. You were consumed by the flame, turned to cinders, and buried in a nameless grave. But because the current Prince of Lothric has refused to take his throne, and the fire is about to go out, the bell has rung to wake up the old lords of Cinder. And when even the lords refused to do their duty, the bell woke up the unkindled, the failures, the trash, the ones who weren't even good enough to be fuel. You are the last resort of a desperate universe. You rise from your grave in the cemetery of ash. The air is cold, and the ground is covered in a fine white powder that isn't snow, but the remains of billions of people. Your first challenge is Eudex Gundyr, a massive warrior who was supposed to link the fire himself but arrived too late. He was judged and found wanting, and now he serves as a sheath for the coiled sword, a literal test to see if you have the spark of life required to even begin the journey. When you pull that sword from his chest, you aren't just starting a fight, you are reclaiming the tool of the cycle. You make your way to Firelink Shrine. But this isn't the cozy, mossy sanctuary of the First Age. This is a cold stone fortress built around a central pit. The thrones of the 5 Lords of Cinder sit empty, towering above you like the seats of a parliament that has gone on permanent strike. Only one throne is occupied, that of Ludleth of Courland. Ludleth is a small, shriveled man who looks like he could be crushed by a strong wind. He is the only lord who returned willingly. He tells you the truth with a quiet, dignified sadness. I linked the fire long ago, and it charred my soul, but I did it because it was my duty. Now, the others have abandoned their posts, and you must bring them back, even if you have to bring back their heads. This is your mission. You are a bounty hunter for the apocalypse. You have to hunt down the legends of the past and force them to do what they were born to do. First, you go to the Road of Sacrifices to find the Abyss Watchers. These are the spiritual successors to Knight Artorias. They founded the Undead Legion, an army that swore to protect the world from the Abyss at any cost. They even modeled their fighting style after Artorias, using greatswords and daggers in a wild, lupine dance. But the tragedy of the Abyss Watchers is that by fighting the dark for so long, they were eventually consumed by it. When you find them in their Greatwood, they are locked in an eternal, fratricidal war. They are killing each other over and over again, because they can no longer tell the difference between their brothers and the Abyss. They are a legion of heroes who have become the very monster they feared. To get their cinders, you have to participate in their final, tragic dance, putting an end to the Order of Artorias once and for all. Then, you descend into the Cathedral of the Deep to find Saint Aldrich. Aldrich was once a man, a cleric who developed a taste for human flesh. He ate so many people that he bloated and softened, eventually becoming a massive sludge-like puddle of black goo. But because he had so much soul power from all the people he consumed, he was made a Lord of Cinder. He didn't want to be. He dreamed of an age of deep sea, a world of cold, dark water that would follow the age of fire. When he was resurrected, he didn't go to his throne. He went to the ruins of Anor Londo to eat the last of the gods. When you face him, you are fighting a monster that is wearing the half-digested body of Dark Moon Gwyndolin like a puppet. It is a horrific, blasphemous end for the royal family of the First Age. Next, you journey to the profaned capital, a city built in a massive cavern, to find Yorm the Giant. Yorm is perhaps the most tragic of all the lords. He was a descendant of the giants who had been conquered in the past, but he rose to become a king who protected the very people who hated him. He fought on the front lines using a massive machete and a shield that was more like a wall. But the people didn't trust him. To prove his sincerity, he gave 2 Storm Ruler swords, the only weapons capable of killing him, to his subjects and to his best friend, Sigurd of Katarina. Yorm linked the fire to try and stop the profaned flame, a cursed fire that was burning his city. But the fire didn't save his people, it consumed them. When Yorm returned from the flame, he found his city filled with charred corpses. He sat on his throne, discarded his shield, and waited for the end. When you face him, if you have followed the quest of Sigurd, your onion-armored friend joins you. Yorm, old friend, Sigurd says, his voice breaking, I have come to fulfill my promise. You kill Yorm, not out of malice, but to honor the promise of a friend who wants to give a tired king the rest he deserves. Finally, you climb the highest spires of Lothric Castle to face the twins, Prince Lothric and Prince Lorien. Lothric was born to be the savior. The entire kingdom was built around the idea that he would link the fire. But he was born frail and sickly, his very existence a result of horrific experiments and holy obsession. His older brother, Lorien, was a mighty warrior who slew demon princes, but he chose to share his brother's curse, losing his voice and the use of his legs to stay by his brother's side. The princes realized the truth that everyone else was too afraid to face. They saw that the cycle was a sham. They saw that the world was being kept alive on life support, and they decided to let it die. The fire is a curse, Lothric tells you. Let it fade. Let us sit here and watch the world go dark together. They aren't villains. They are pacifists who are tired of the blood. They refuse to be fuel for a fire that has done nothing but cause pain. But the machine of the world doesn't care about their feelings. You have to kill them. You have to take their souls and place them on the throne so that the final ritual can begin. With the 5 cinders of the lords, you travel to the kiln of the first flame one last time. But the kiln is no longer the small arena where Gwyn waited. It is a nightmare landscape where all of history has been crushed together. You see the towers of Lothric, the cathedrals of Anor Londo, and the ruins of Drangleic all swirling around the flame. And there, guarding the embers, is the soul of Cinder. This is not a single being. This is the manifestation of every single person who has ever linked the fire. It is Gwyn. It is the Chosen Undead. It is the bearer of the curse. It is the nameless thousands who gave their lives to the flame. It fights with every weapon, swords, sorcery, miracles, and spears. It is the history of the world fighting to defend itself. In its second phase, it takes on the fighting style of Lord Gwyn himself, the piano music returning to remind you that everything started with him. By defeating the soul of Cinder, you aren't just winning a fight, you are defeating the concept of the cycle itself. But even here, at the end of the world, there is a hidden story. We have to talk about the Ringed City. Long ago, when Gwyn was at the height of his power, he gave a city to the Pygmies, the first humans. He gave them his daughter, Filianor, to watch over them. It seemed like a gift, but it was a prison. Gwyn feared the dark soul within humanity, so he tucked the Pygmies away at the very edge of the world, behind a massive wall and a sleeping goddess. He wanted to make sure that the Age of Man would never begin. At the very end of time, you travel to this city. You find a world that has literally run out of room. The Dreg Heap is a mountain of every city that ever existed, piled up like trash. You descend into the Ringed City and find Slave Knight Gale. Gale is a nobody. He is an old man in red rags who has been a slave and a soldier for thousands of years. He has no glory, no throne, and no legend. But Gale has a mission. He is looking for the blood of the dark soul. He wants to give it to a young girl, a painter, so she can use it to paint a new world, a world that is cold, dark, and very gentle, a world that will never burn. To get the blood, Gale has to go to the very end of the world. He has to hunt down the last of the Pygmy lords and consume their souls. By the time you find him, Gale has eaten the dark soul itself. He has become a massive, hulking beast, his red cape trailing behind him like a river of blood. He has lost his mind, but he has accomplished his task. He knew he couldn't survive the dark soul, so he led you there to kill him, so you could take the blood back to the painter. The fight with Gale is the true ending of Dark Souls. It takes place in a desert of ash that stretches infinitely in all directions. There are no kingdoms left, no gods, no dragons, just two nobodies, an unkindled and a slave fighting over the scrap of a soul at the end of time. When you defeat Gale and take the blood of the dark soul back to the girl, she starts to paint. She asks you what the name of the new world should be. It is a world born not from fire, but from the dark. It is a world that can't be corrupted by the cycle. It is a new beginning, hidden away from the ruins of the old one. Back at the first flame, you have your final choice. You can link the fire, but it's a pathetic sight. You sit down and the fire barely flickers. It doesn't roar, it doesn't bring back the sun. It just continues the gray, tired existence for a few more years. It is a choice of pure denial. You can end the fire, you call the firekeeper, and she gently takes the flame into her hands. The screen goes black. The age of fire is over. But even in the dark, she says, "I can see tiny sparks dancing in the distance." The dark isn't an ending. It's a sleep. Eventually, another fire will start, but for now, the world is finally allowed to rest. Or you can usurp the fire. You can take the flame into yourself and become the Lord of Hollows. You don't burn it and you don't let it die. You claim it for humanity. You lead an army of the undead into a new age where humans are the masters of their own destiny. It is a path of power and defiance, a final no to the gods who tried to keep you as fuel. What have we learned from this long journey? Dark Souls is a story about the beauty of the end. It's about the fact that things are precious precisely because they don't last. Gwyn's sin was his fear of the dark, his refusal to let the sun set. By trying to keep his age alive forever, he turned the world into a nightmare. He turned heroes into monsters and love into a curse. The world of Lothric is the final result of that fear. A world that is literally falling apart because it wasn't allowed to change. But in that decay, we found something beautiful. We found Solaire's son. We found Sigurd's friendship. We found the painter's new world. We found that even when the gods are dead and the sun is leaking, the individual soul still has value. Your journey mattered because you were the one who finally had the courage to make a choice. You were the one who saw through the illusions of Honor Londo and the lies of the serpents. You were the one who walked through the ash and faced the manifestation of history. As you drift off to sleep tonight, I want you to think about the embers. Fire is a wonderful thing. It gives us warmth, it gives us light, and it brings us together. But fire also needs to go out so we can sleep. The dark isn't something to be afraid of. It is the silence between the notes of a song. It is the cool air after a hot day. The Age of Dark is not an age of evil, it is simply the next page of the book. Gwyn wanted to stay on page 1 forever. He was so in love with the beginning that he tried to stop the ending. But you are the one who finished the story. You are the one who closed the book and handed the pen to the painter. You have done something that no god could ever do. You have accepted the truth. The cycle is broken. The ash has settled. The long night has finally come. And in that night, you can finally rest. No more bells, no more dragons, no more asylums, just the quiet, gentle dark of a world that is no longer burning. Close your eyes, feel the weight of the blanket against your skin. Imagine the sound of the wind blowing across the desert of ash at the end of time. It's a peaceful sound. It's the sound of a universe that is finally at peace. You've carried the Lord Vessel, you've worn the crowns of kings, and you've defeated the soul of Cinder. You've done enough. Don't worry about the flame. Whether it's linked, extinguished, or usurped, the story is complete. The tragedy of Lordran is over, and the memory of its heroes will live on in the new world the painter is making. Solaire will have his sun there, Artorias will have his peace. And you will have your rest. The night is long, but it is not cold. We have the memories of the fire to keep us warm. We have the stories of the friends we lost to guide us through the shadows, and we have the knowledge that we were here at the end of everything and we didn't go hollow. We kept our sanity. We kept our heart. We kept our humanity. Sleep well, unkindled. The bell has stopped ringing. The bonfires are low. The journey is over. And as the last ember fades into the dark, remember the words of the Firekeeper. Mayst thou thy peace discover. The world is a vast, complicated, and often cruel place. It asks so much of us, and it often gives so little in return. But like the characters in Lordran, we find our meaning in the struggle. We find our light in the connections we make with others. We find our purpose in the choices we make when everything else is falling apart. Dark Souls isn't just a game. It's a meditation on what it means to be alive in a world that is constantly changing. It's a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there is a spark of something worth fighting for. And it's a promise that even when the fire goes out, we won't be alone. We will always have the stories. We will always have the ash. We will always have the soul. Think about the silence of the Age of Ancients. It wasn't a bad silence. It was just a beginning. The silence at the end of the world is the same. It's a clean slate. It's a moment of reflection before the next spark appears. Because fire always returns. Life always finds a way to crack through the stone. But for now, just enjoy the quiet. You've earned it. Let your breathing become slow and steady. Imagine the stars coming out in the Age of Dark. Stars that were always there but were hidden by the glare of Gwyn's artificial sun. They are beautiful, aren't they? Cold, distant, and perfect. They don't need fuel, they don't ask for sacrifice, they just shine. The story of the first flame is a story of a great effort to hold on to the light. It was a heroic effort, a tragic effort, and ultimately a failed effort. But in that failure, we found the truth. We found that the dark is not our enemy. The dark is our home. It's where we came from and it's where we return. It's the womb of the universe. Rest your head. The night is your friend. The shadows are your blankets. The legends are your dreams. You've walked the path of the gods and the path of the humans, and you've found the way back to yourself. There are no more bosses to fight, no more souls to collect, just the endless, gentle dark. I'll be here, watching over the embers until they finally vanish, but you go ahead. Step into the painter's world. Step into the dark. Step into the rest you've been searching for since the very first day. You've done well, traveler. You've done so very well. Good night, unkindled. Good night, chosen undead. Good night, bearer of the curse. May your sleep be as deep as the abyss and as peaceful as the ringed city before the storm. The story is told, the cycle is done, and the dark is finally here. And it is beautiful.